So my name is Elise Destree. I work as a regulatory affairs consultant at 3D Pharma Exchange in the Netherlands. It's very unfortunate that I wasn't able to join you in person. I was at the conference last year in Slovenia, and it really made a really big impression on me. Very impressed with the conference, the content, the organization, but also very moved by all the families that participated and to meet everybody at the heart of this foundation. And everybody being together and being able to share their stories, it really made a lasting impression on me. So as a regulatory affairs consultant, I help small companies and academic institutions, and in this case, a patient organization to develop new medicines. And my focus is to make sure that all the regulatory requirements are met, and there are many different requirements from different agencies, so it can be quite difficult to get through all of these steps. I work on this project together with Ruud Buters. You have heard him, I think, yesterday afternoon with a session on non-clinical studies. So we are very happy to contribute to this program. Next slide, please. I'm not seeing the next slide, but maybe you.
Yeah, we are working on it. No.
Okay.
We are working on it. It's been quite a challenge. Bruno, we need Bruno. We are so sorry.
No problem. Yes,
Oh,
thank you very much.
we see the slide, right?
Yeah, I do at least. So what I would like to talk to you today about is the role of the health authorities, the regulators, in the development of new medicines, the different phases of developing a medicine, some of the complexities, and in particular for the development of Urbagen, some on the interactions with the regulators, and some of the incentives and the tools from the regulators to help and guide gene therapy development. Next slide, please.
Bruno
has to stay on board.
Bruno,
luckily,
next
I only have 7 slides, so it won't happen too much. Thank you. So I've limited my talk to the situation in Europe, but very similar systems are in place in many different countries outside of Europe. So it's many of the principles are the same. Europe has a strong regulatory framework, a set of laws and guidelines to ensure that clinical trials are performed in a safe manner and in an ethical way, that therapies are of a high quality and provide a clear benefit. So they must have a positive risk-benefit ratio, and that the laws are there to ensure that patient rights are protected throughout the development and marketing phase of a medicine. Some of the key players in Europe are the European Committee. They are giving out the laws, the regulations, directives. And then another player is the National Competent Authority. In each European country there is one, and they are responsible for regulating medicines and clinical trials, and they make sure that all clinical research complies with the European and the national laws and ethical standards. So they review clinical trial applications, and they must be approved by them before you can start your trial, and they oversee that the trials are performed correctly, and they receive reports about side effects, and they monitor those in the background. And then a third player, very important, is the European Medicines Agency, the EMA, in which all of the EU member states are represented. The EMA brings out guidelines, they have all sorts of incentives to help you out, and they review marketing authorization applications, which are the dossiers that you submit to them to gain market approval. So the role of regulatory affairs in this, it's a specialized role inside companies and institutions that are developing medicines. It's there to ensure that all the steps in drug development are done in compliance with all the regulations and the guidelines from the health authorities. Next slide, please. So let's look at some of the different phases in drug development. Excuse me. So bringing a therapy to patients is quite a long process. And this diagram shows some of these main steps. And it's good to realize that any of these steps can take several years to finalize. So from thinking about developing a medicine up to market approval can take easily up to 10 years. So the first step, the discovery and the research step or phase, here researchers look at the best way to treat a particular disease. And sometimes treatment is mainly targeted at treating the symptoms of a disease, such as pain. But in the case of the CTNNB1 syndrome and the development of Orbagen, it is the aim to correct the disease at the genetic level by developing a gene therapy product. The fact that it is a gene therapy product already provides a lot of focus on what work should be done. For instance, these products are usually administered by injection and not in the form of a pill or a tablet, so not orally. They're manufactured through quite hard biotechnological processes that have many more challenges than when you're assembling a pill. So this has provided a lot of guidance on what needs to happen. Then once you have established what sort of product you're going to make and the indication you're going to make it for, you go to the next phase, which is the preclinical phase, and where you're testing that the product works and that it's safe to use. And you do that by testing it in the lab in animal models and also in animals themselves. And when it has been shown that the product is safe and efficacious, and you can have a prediction of what should be the dose in humans, then you can move to the next step and then you can start your clinical trials. But before you can start your clinical trials, as I said earlier, you have to submit a clinical trial application. And you do that by submitting the dossier to the country where you will perform the clinical trial. So in the case of Orbagen, this will be in Slovenia. And then the authority will look at all the data that you've generated in the previous steps, such as the non-clinical data. And they will look at the trial protocol, where you describe how you will conduct the study. So the protocol is quite detailed, and you describe the population that you want to treat, so which age groups, elderly, maybe children, the dose of the drug, so how much will you administer, how will you administer it, so in this case, intracerebroventricular, I still struggle with that word. Where will you do it, what hospital, what country, how will these patients be monitored? Do they need to come in to the hospital? Do they need blood tests? Do they need CT scans, x-rays? How often do they need to come in? All of that is described in the clinical protocol. So once you've submitted that and you've received approval from the regulatory authority, you can move on to the clinical trial phase, so the phase of trials in humans. And traditionally, these are separated in 3 phases. So you start with a phase 1, where you test safety in a small group of healthy people. You look at safety and you look at the best dose to treat. And then in a phase 2 study, you test the dose that you established in your phase 1, and you test it for safety and for efficacy in the patient population. And then in phase 3, you have a larger trial where you confirm the benefit and you monitor safety and efficacy. So a phase 3 trial for a vaccine or for any new drug, such as a high blood pressure drug, this can mean that you test it in thousands of people. And so you can quickly see, going through these phases, that such a traditional way of testing in clinical trials is not going to work in the case of CTNNB1 syndrome. You can't test the safety in healthy volunteers because you're going to make genetic changes to people. You can't test it in large groups of patients because it's a rare disease. Still, though, you have to prove that your product works and that it's safe to use. So in these cases, it's often good to have a discussion with the regulators to find the best way to come to a good testing protocol. Then after you've done all your clinical trials and you've shown that the therapy is safe and provides meaningful benefit, you can submit a marketing authorization application to the EMA for approval. And once you have approval, you can get to the market. And then the work is not done because, especially for gene therapies, you must keep closely monitoring all of the patients to track long-term safety and efficacy. Next slide, please. So some of the complexities for development of organ. We touched upon it in the previous slide. So first, it's a gene therapy. This means the effect is aimed at including a healthy copy of a gene into certain cells so that protein expression, in this case beta-catenin, can be restored. Of course, the intention is that this results in a lifelong effect. That also means that people receiving this therapy should be monitored for a very long time to make sure that the protein expression remains stable and that there are no unwanted side effects. Then, of course, this is a rare disease, so patients' numbers are very small and normal-sized clinical studies are not possible. Also, because it's such a rare disease, there's not much yet known about the syndrome, and in many ways you are inventing the wheels. And for this part, it's the human, or what is it, the natural history study is very important to gain more knowledge about the syndrome. And then another complexity that it's intended to treat children. Children can benefit the most, the younger the better. But it's of course also a vulnerable group as they are still growing and developing their bodies. So the regulators acknowledge that these difficulties exist and they have implemented some tools and incentives to help developers. Next slide, please. Thank you. Gene therapies fall together with somatic cell therapy and tissue engineered medicines under the advanced therapy medicinal products. And the development of these products is quite complex and it's also still relatively new. There's a separate regulations for these products from the European Committee, and there's a special committee within the EMA that deals with these products, which is the Committee for Advanced Therapies. So some of the specialties that come with developing an ATMP, one is that your marketing authorization application has to be approved through a centralized procedure. So the EMA has to approve your product, which means that once it's approved, you can market your product in all EU member states, which is, I think, a very good incentive. Then something else is that there's a 65% fee reduction when you request a scientific advice from the EMA. So if you want to talk about your development plans, you can do that at a reduced fee. And if you know that a scientific advice can cost up to 50 to 100,000 euros, 65 fee reduction is quite a nice reduction. There are a couple of more tools for developers. So maybe the next slide, please. One of the, oh, it's moved a little bit. But one of the incentives is the orphan drug designation. And you can request an orphan drug designation when you can show that your product adheres to several criteria. One, it has to be intended for the treatment of a disease that's life-threatening or chronically debilitating. Another one is that the disease must be a rare one. It cannot affect more than 5 in 10,000 people across the EU. And there should be no satisfactory treatment already on the market, or if there is, you must show that your medicine is of significant benefit to this patient group. So you can request at EMA by submitting a small dossier where you highlight all of these items. And when you receive an orphan drug designation, you get again reduced fees for all sorts of regulatory procedures, 75% fee reduction for scientific advice. And when you get to the market, you get 10 years of market exclusivity. And the CTN and B1 Foundation requested orphan drug designation on the 27th of March. And what's really great is that the designation has been received just last week. Next slide, please. So another tool from the regulators is scientific advice. So you can ask either the EMA or the National Competence Authority for advice. This can be done at any stage of development. And you do this to get feedback on your plans, to get clarity on the applicability of certain guidance. Guidance is not always tailored to exactly what you are doing. So you have to make choices, and it's good to talk about the regulators about your choices. If you do that, then at least you know that what you're doing is the right studies, because you don't want to be in a situation where you're submitting your clinical trial application and it turns out that you've missed certain steps, and then you lose a lot of time because of that. So you can go for an early interaction. For instance, Innovation Task Force with the EMA. That's an advice that is informal, so you have a bit more chance to speak freely about all of your plans. Such meetings can also be held with national authorities. And you can go for formal advice, so at the EMA again, or at the national agencies. So the foundation has had a few interactions. So Innovation Task Force meeting in 2022 with the EMA, and there have been 2 scientific advices with the Slovenian agency in 2023 and 2024. I think these advices have helped a lot with designing all the required studies and all the research data, and informed what should be written for the clinical trial application, which hopefully will be submitted in the very near future. So that's, I think, a great state to be at. I think this was my last slide. So I thank you for your attention, and I'm happy to take any questions or at a later stage